I like the reframing of like maybe not as self-expression, but almost like some sacred flame. That's the idea.
That's right.
And that the founders are the protector of that flame, so to speak. And hopefully, like Tim Cook, you can pass it off. It's really hard to do. So maybe re-articulate what you think that idea or flame is for Stripe beyond the grow the GDP of the internet. Like if you had to put another... Like,
beyond grow the GDP of the internet. I think
it's a good start. Yeah, it's a good start.
A lot in that flame.
Do you think that, so if I'm working at Stripe and I hear that, what is the next causal link, thing that happens because I'm thinking about that idea?
Yeah.
Well, maybe just to riff on what we're talking about, and look, we're now getting into things that I think we're just exploring live, but many of these cultures that we're describing are not kind of unique cultures in a whole bunch of different ways. They are actually strong cultures in quite similar ways, where one, what we're talking about is quality and kind of producing higher quality sustainably and being unreasonable, basically. Clearly Apple, The Economist, The New Yorker, places like that. And the other one we're talking about is high agency, and again, making it so that you're not just okay with that. Tesla, a good example of this, where again, high agency in the way where they weren't just satisfied with subcontracting all of the parts of the car to subcontractors, and it's the best wing mirror that you can buy from the wing mirror subcontractor. Instead, they brought a lot of stuff in-house. And I think in Stripe's case, Patrick can speak to some of the examples, but definitely I think a lot of where we've gotten to date and how Stripe has won market share to this point, there's a bunch of stuff we can talk about on the quality point, and similarly on kind of the high agency point. A big part of how the Stripe product suite has gotten to where it is today is not just kind of self-defining as, okay, we're in this industry or this is what we do, but always be willing to, come back to the customer problem of, okay, we want to make trading online easier. We want to make it easy to start and grow an internet business. And then what holds up businesses? Okay, everyone's complaining about, sales tax and VAT and everything being hard. I guess we're, getting into the software business now, and we're, solving sales tax for people. And there's a bunch of stuff you have to learn about, but we'll just go figure it out. And again, I think we definitely try to inculcate that at Stripe, the high agency piece.
But to your question about sort of, well, what's the if we want to make that that idea somewhat more concrete, like what's the next incremental version? There's different, I think, somewhat useful disaggregations, but the one that I usually go to next is this one that we just referenced of how do you cause there to be more companies started?
Yeah.
And that's itself a pretty rich vein, and that's some of why we do Stripe Press. That's some of why we do Stripe Atlas. It's why we try to kind of give away anything useful that we discover that we think can help lower barriers to entry. To some extent, it's why we expand to more countries, and that a lot of the countries we expand to, there aren't necessarily big pockets of revenue or payment volume or something there today, but we're pretty optimistic about the possibility of new ventures being undertaken there that in future years will be of some significance. So there's that kind of version of it, and then the second one is okay, sort of conditioned on some pool of companies existing, like what are the binding constraints on their success and growth, and we really try to gear people towards what doesn't exist as opposed to what does. That is, rather than thinking about, well, where are there profit pools today that we can sidle up to and sort of plant some flag and try to displace others. I think it's both easier and honestly just more fulfilling to think about, well, what are the profits that nobody's making? And how can we build something that would enable that to happen? Like global GDP is about order of $100 trillion. Where's the next 50 trillion of GDP going to come from? And how can we be causally responsible for helping that happen? And I don't. In framing the question that way, I don't want to sound kind of grandiose. In the world's a big place, and many actors are responsible for enabling that. But like on the margin, how can we kind of help push in that direction? Now, I was having dinner with Jensen Huang back a couple of months ago, and he used the turn of phrase. We were discussing this idea, and he used it because I think Jensen's, well, now probably he's not underrated, but I think for a very long time, he was very
not today.
Exactly. Yes, for a very long time he was very underrated. Where he like. When we talk about the sort of the founder-run technology companies in Silicon Valley, you go to Mark Zuckerberg and Mark Benioff and all these characters, but Jensen was usually not on that list, even though he's been sort of quietly running NVIDIA for several decades now.
$7 billion a year in cash flow.
Right.
Is that pre or post today's earnings?
No, for a long time. Yeah.
Oh, but sorry,
growing-
but you're
and
going to say
growing.
you're not adjusting that for today.
No,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes. No, exactly. An incredible business. But we were discussing this idea of sort of trying to really encourage people to look for the new opportunities. And he was saying that NVIDIA much prefers $0 billion markets to $10 billion markets.
Yeah.
And when they first introduced CUDA, for example, like it was a $0 billion market.
You're actually getting at something that I think is a belief that Stripe has that is actually not that widely shared and is a big part of how we've managed to get to where we are, is just that much more internet commerce is possible than currently happens today.
And it's global commerce.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, yeah, sure, but like people get mad into TAM analyses, and business school types are just always talking about, as you say, where are the profit pools? Which is like, when you think about it, a really unambitious way to look at the world, because it's like, how can I, your margin is my opportunity.
A lot of businesses inadvertently, implicitly bet on stasis.
Yeah, whereas in Stripe's case, like we measure a lot of the incrementality of, we go talk to people who started their businesses on Stripe or, use Stripe Atlas or something like that. And we ask them, what kind of impact did Stripe have on this? And a majority report a very significant impact, and a pretty significant number say, I think it's unlikely I would have started my business without this set of tools. And then, of course, you might say, okay, Stripe is useful at, the low end, getting off the ground. It makes it easy. But like a large company that is up and running, they have everything figured out when it comes to payments, and Stripe won't be able to help them. But actually, that's also not the case. And when we've run A/B tests on people using kind of Stripe's payments infrastructure rather than kind of whatever unoptimized payments infrastructure they had themselves, the latest numbers we have are a 10.5% conversion uplift. So again, 10.5% more commerce taking place on this particular site than would otherwise have had. And you can see it in all the kind of the anecdotal stats. And, as we go talk to customers, I remember talking to a customer a little while back that had just turned off their store in Mexico because fraud was too high, and rather than deal with it, they just decided to not make the store available in Mexico. That's crazy when you think about that. In 2023, we have not figured this global commerce out, and so that is the underlying belief that Stripe has that I think has actually helped get to a lot of where we are today.
And I think last time we talked in this format, you said something about the most impressive thing about the big internet companies is that they've ridden multiple waves. Like they weren't one-trick ponies. Like they successfully evolved. And I wonder how you square those two things. Like the waves maybe seem kind of obvious. Maybe one might have been crypto. Now it might be AI. Might be something else, material science or biotechnology or something. I don't know. How do you think about that 0 billion Jensen Huang idea with the Peter Thiel idea up against AI is obviously the thing we should focus on as you think about Stripe's future?
I think the nature of the problem for a Facebook or for a Snapchat or a Pinterest or something is actually quite different because they're serving a consumer sensibility. It's ultimately a kind of entertainment product. I mean, but there's utility and messaging and so forth, but some significant portion of the use is entertainment. And there's a lot of, in principle, fungibility across different pursuits there, and on some level, watching Instagram stories is competing with Netflix, is competing with maybe it's even competing with ChatGPT. I don't know. So in that, because consumer taste by its nature evolves, I think that necessarily puts one into this mode of wave riding, whereas Stripe operates at a lower level of the pace layering diagram. You've fashion and infrastructure and culture, and these kind of different sort of sedimentary layers evolving and changing on different timescales. And at the infrastructure layer that Stripe operates on, things change more slowly, and that's kind of bad news in the sense that it's not possible to have these insane meteoric kind of appreciations, in the overwhelming majority of cases. But the flip side is if you sort of get things right, you can compound for a very long time. And I've always found it striking that the internet really never grew in any given year at an insane rate. It's just been this incredibly durable, like 30% a year compounding for several decades. And 1.3 to the 40 just ends up being a large number. So I think Stripe has more of those dynamics. And I mean, you can see this if you look at businesses like Visa or MasterCard or something, where like they're obviously conceived in a pre-internet world, and yet like the wave of the internet, I mean, it obviously changed their business in various ways, but it didn't like fundamentally restructure it. And I think with everything on the horizon, it's still the case that there are going to be businesses and transactions and exchanges and associated challenges and complexities that
Homer Simpson, money can be exchanged for goods or services.
that come with that, exactly. So basically, I think Stripe, because of its position in the ecosystem, needs to strike the right balance between kind of spotting the opportunity in these waves, and we're excited about the fact that basically all of the AI companies have are implementing revenue models at the outset of necessity, because it's like expensive to run inference and training and everything. And basically all of those companies are doing it on Stripe. It's kind of hard to find an exception. And not only are they kind of using Stripe for the most basic payment, but they're kind of using all the higher level functionality kind of on top of that, because they have they have sophisticated needs and they are sophisticated companies.